Welcome to the inner studios of Opening the Door to the Unknown. I'm your host, Dr. Clark Schmidt, or Magus 1100. Um, this afternoon, I'm going to talk about how I became interested in the research and investigation of UFOlogy and UFOs. I thought it was interesting the way that it happened, um, and kind of strange at the same time. Interesting, and strange. But like anything else in the metaphysical, esoterical, or in hermetics, it is interesting and strange for something to be created, especially in that particular field of study. So, let me begin. It was 1966. I was 15 years of age and a freshman in high school. I wanted to do something a little bit different than going to watching football games on a Friday evening. I didn't like talking about girls, and I wasn't interested in classes really. I mean, I was doing all right in some and lousy in others. Um, so like I said, I just decided that I wanted to do something that was unique, unusual, and so my mother had some property out at a lake, and she also had a one rental cottage that she would rent out for the season, and this young couple were interested in renting, and so they did. Well, I got to know the couple and their children fairly well, and I'm going to call her Margaret, and I would go and visit like every Saturday in the afternoon, and we would just sit and out on the porch, just talking, just nonsense, you might say. But one afternoon is that the subject was quite interesting. Um, Got to talking about reincarnation and phone calls from the dead and haunted houses and ESP and a lot of things that had to do with the paranormal. And I asked Margaret how she became interested in the subject, and she told me that she was reading Fate magazines. I never heard of Fate. So I asked her, I said, well, could you bring out a few that I could go through? They sound kind of interesting by what we are discussing. And she said, yeah, sure, no problem. So the following Friday is that she brought me out a bag of them. I think it was about 10 or 12, and I read every one of them from cover to cover. And on that Sunday, I handed her back the package, and I told her if she and I asked her if she could bring some more out, and she said sure. Well, I started to read more and more on Fate, and what I was finding out about Fate is that articles were on UFOs, like on sightings and different things like that. Anyways, I said, do you happen to know anybody in the field? And she said, yes. She did. In fact, she told me is that a friend of hers from Orlando was coming to Wisconsin to visit for a week. and she said that she would be happy to introduce me to this gentleman, and I was ecstatic. So this was on Friday. A friend of mine who was 2 years older than I was out on a date, and I was waiting for him. Now, when my parents bought this property out at this lake, there was a farm right across the road that had a big cornfield. So I was standing in the driveway waiting for this friend of mine to return, and I was throwing stones across the road into the field itself. And as I kept doing this, I happened to see an object about maybe 1,000 yards. Didn't look like it was moving. And as I continued to throw the rocks across into the cornfield, is that I still was watching this object, and I'm thinking to myself, well, damn it, this thing hasn't seemed to be moving. And I said to myself, well, maybe it was some of the Army transport planes from Billy Mitchell going to Madison. Now, I knew the route that the transport flew every day of the week. And just like I said, so this was Friday evening, but I didn't think that they would be flying, I didn't know that they would be flying this late. So I kept throwing the stones across the road into the field, and I just continued watching this object. Now it seemed to me like this object was coming a little bit closer. And I happened to see like green and red. Green for starboard, red for port. And so I thought it was a plane. So I thought it was one of the planes coming from Billy Mitchell. Well, I had a rude awakening. As this object started to get closer, I noticed that it was nice and round. I mean, big and round. And all of a sudden, not just having the red and green lights, now it started to go with blue and orange and white. So I knew now it wasn't a plane, and I knew now it wasn't a satellite. Because I'm thinking, well, how did a satellite get, be traveling at treetop level? It would have fallen out of the sky like a meteor, and boom! I mean, bust up into gillions of pieces. So now my mind is really running, and I'm thinking to myself, I am actually experiencing a UFO. And was I ecstatic? And I was hoping that this friend of mine would come home, right at this point in time, as for him to see what I was seeing, and also to have a witness, knowing that I wasn't going bonkers. Well, finally, this friend of mine did happen to pull into the driveway, and now this object was slowly moving to the right, still at treetop level. And it must have been about 500 yards out. So I rapped on the car window, and I told this friend to get his ass out of the car, and I wanted to show him what I was watching for almost 25 minutes out there in the cornfield. He looked, and he looked at me, again looked at the object, and I said, see if we could follow it as far as the road would take us, that was parallel with the cornfield before the road, went either to the left or to the right to where we lost the field itself. Exactly what we did. He was driving and I was watching, and all of a sudden it was like the object was, how should I say, even with us at speed. We must have been driving maybe about 35 miles an hour, and the object seemed to be going at that same speed, and we were parallel to one another. But then all of a sudden the road, like I said, started to veer off. You had to swing to the right, and then all of a sudden the cornfield was behind you. But before we had to do that, is make that right, is that damn object started to climb. And it started to climb, and it started to climb, and it started to climb, and all of a sudden, bap, it was gone. I mean, gone. Just like that. And we pulled over to the side, and he pulled over to the side, and he stopped the car. And I was a two-pack, I was smoking 2 packs a day, and I do admit that. But anything a Pisces does, they do it not half-assed. They have to go full steam ahead. And so 2 packs was just about my limit on smoking. At the age of 15, mind you, that I took out my pack of old gold filters, which I really enjoyed. But that's a different story. And I offered him one because he smoked Marlboros, and we looked and we lit up our cigarettes, and we just kind of looked at each other. He turned on the radio, and we looked at each other, and he said, "If you don't tell anybody, I won't." And I looked back at him and I said, "I'm not going to say anything. I don't want people to think that I'm cuckoo. A lot of people think I am now, but I don't want them to really get the impression that I have gone off, have climbed the tree and scooted out to the end of the limb, you might say." So we never said anything to anybody about it until that Sunday. This gentleman that Margaret knew from Orlando came out, and she introduced me to him as his name was Walter Mershing, and hell of a nice guy, in fact. I found out that he was a director of a small UFO club in Orlando that did investigations and research on flying saucers. And so I said, "You're just the person I want to talk to." And he says, "What do you want to tell me?" And I said, "If I told you something," I said, "you're not going to think that I'm a little whack, right?" And he's, "No." And I said, "Great. I saw a UFO Friday night." And he looked at me and he said, "What?" I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "I saw a UFO Friday night, waiting for a friend of mine, throwing rocks out in the across the road into the cornfield, and I saw this object." Now, he asked me what type of UFO was it, if it was a cylinder type, if it was round, if it was like a pie shaped, and I said it was more round. And he started to smile, and he said nonchalantly, "A scout ship." And I said, "A scout ship?" He said, "Yeah, it's a scout ship. It's what they send looking for either a place to land or for, either at the terrain, or looking for a place to land, or if there's any type of water or cattle or whatever." And he said, "We're just learning about these scout, and we're just starting to learn about these scout ships, and so never heard of anybody." And he said is that a few people have mentioned them, but not by what you have said, like for the lights, and they told me like for the lights, and whatever I could give for a description. Now, it just made me really interested. And he said, so he said, how would you like to become a member of my organization? And I said, yeah, great. And so he got up, took out his wallet, and took out a card, and he signed it, and he says, you are now a member of UFOIC. And he says, you are going to be my regional director for the state of Wisconsin. And I said, wow. I said, wow. You know. And he said, now, here's what your responsibilities are. Every time you hear or read about somebody seeing a UFO, if you could contact the person, if they, if you can get a phone number and talk to them, and get all the information you can from them, and you type up a complete report, and then you mail it to me in Orlando. And I said, I can do that. I said, I think that would be fun. Well, anyways, he went back to Milwaukee with Margaret and her husband, and I found out that on the news that I heard the next day, and this was on the, what was it? I got written down here. This was this was on March the 26th. About a major UFO flap that happened in Michigan, especially in Ann Arbor, and I imagine that everybody heard about that flap. Where Heineke came out and classified that people were seeing swamp gas and all that and the like. Anyways, March went and April went. Well, let's just put it like this: is that for the rest of the 1966? I did research, like every month, of if there was any UFO sightings. And what I did is that I took for Michigan compared to Wisconsin and compared to Florida. Why I did Florida, I just decided to do it because I would have received a report from Walter for the year. But anyways, here's how it stacked up. In 1966 was a heavy year for a UFO flap. Okay. Oops, I don't know why that's in there. March 14th, in Dexter and Hillsdale, Michigan. Grand Rapids, Michigan, on the 17th of March. March 17th again, Ann Arbor. That's when we had the big. That's when they had the big flap. March 19, Big Rapids, Michigan. March 20th, again Dexter, Michigan. March 21st, again Hillsdale, Michigan. March 24th, Holland, Michigan. That's where they have tulips. They got great tulips that you can buy. Again, March 20. Let's see. I think I said that again for Ann Arbor. That was on the 26th of March. March 28th. Niles, Michigan, March 31st. Vicksburg, Michigan. A- April, April 10th. Dearborn, Michigan. April 12th. Beulah. Oh no, I'm sorry. April the 7th. Beulah, Michigan. April 13th. Kalamazoo, Michigan. April 18th. Battle Creek, Michigan. June the 13th. Milan, Michigan. September 8th. Marquette, Michigan. November 8th. Saginaw, Michigan. In Wisconsin, where I did the investigations, was on March the 13th. La Crosse, Wisconsin, Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and Spooner, Wisconsin. Down in Florida, again, March 22nd to the 23rd was on KW. I have to think what KW was with my handwriting. KW. Well, someplace I forget. March 23rd again, Fort Pierce, Florida. April 4th in Hague, Florida. April 25th, Ocala, Florida. May 23rd, Gainesville, Florida. June. June the 2nd, Sebring. November 10th, Pinellas Park. So, plus also there was there was about 25 sightings in Massachusetts, and there was 15 sightings in. Oh, geez, let's see. There was 4 or 5 sightings in New Jersey, 4 in New York. Like I said, 66 was a very good year for as a major flap of UFO sightings. Now these are all classified as close encounters of the first kind. Before long, is that we started to move into close encounters of the second kind, of the third kind, and as the fourth kind. The close encounters of the second kind would have been a ship landing, and the person actually watched the landing itself and saw maybe occupants debark from the ship itself. Or close encounters of the third kind were seeing actual aliens or classified as abductions, and close encounters of the fourth kind was actually being taken for a ride out into the galaxy. But second, third, and fourth kinds were classified a little bit later down the line. So what people are seeing for many years, I would have to say, from 55, 56, in the early late 40s, 46, 47. Up until I decided to slink away from the investigations and the research for a couple years. So I would have to say from 46 to 78, when I was actually heavy into doing research of the UFO phenomena, and also investigating sightings as well. Like if it became a close encounter of the second, third, or fourth type. of for the classification, well, like this, for the classification of. So like I said, in 1966, when I first started out, like I said, I wanted to do something a little bit different than what everybody else was doing in high school, and I did, and I really enjoyed it. In fact, I can still say today that I am more enthused with UFOlogy than I am with the metaphysical or the esoterical or the hermetics. Because back in '66, that was my true first experience with the paranormal. And yes, I would classify, excuse me, UFOlogy as paranormal, not in parapsychology, but again in the metaphysical, because why is what did you learn about the metaphysical means metaphysics, something higher, and when we're talking about UFOlogy and spaceships from other planets coming down here, you can't get any higher than the universe. Instead of parapsychology, where again para means belonging to or next to. Okay. So I did within the first year. That I became when I became a member of UFOIC with Walter, is that I did send him a lot of detailed information, as well as he sent me back a lot of detailed information from Florida. I will be talking more about, especially with Florida sightings. Since I've been more of a resident in Florida than instead of Wisconsin. Not saying that I still do not keep up with sightings in Wisconsin or Massachusetts or Montana or Michigan or Australia or just all over the United States and across the Atlantic and also across the Pacific as well. Of course, as you can see, this is just half here of what I got that I have transcribed for sightings and also for abductions and you name it. I got a lot more that are put away, but these are the most important. The reason why I brought these out is because these are the most important books I feel that it would interest the general public. Now, why do I say that? Is because, like I said, people talk about the sightings as like sightings today, and there's still a hell of a lot of sightings. Don't get me wrong, but I think that the sightings going back to the early '40s, to the '50s, to the '60s, and maybe to the late '70s are more exciting than what is being reported today. And the reason why I say this is, which I'll be talking about in my next in the next chapter coming up, is there are still a few UFO organizations that are left, but I'm not going to mention them in the first chapter here. Like I said, this will be coming up with the names of UFO organizations and who actually belonged in the organizations themselves, which is, I feel, it is the most interesting. Like I said, is that the one that I belong to with UFOIC? It was very small. I think there was only like 20 members that had any type of dealings within the membership itself as doing the research and as of the investigations. But I feel is that something that's a little bit smaller than larger can give more impact on the type of subject of what a person is actually researching and investigating. So, like I said, you have all the sightings that I decided to take. Like I said, I could have gone into with Massachusetts, and there was like I think about 30 sightings in Massachusetts, in New York, and like I said, North Dakota, South Dakota, the Carolinas. Again, this is just strictly for 1966 alone. When I first got myself involved with the investigations and also with the actual research of. And again, I'm going to be talking about the people that I feel were interesting, going back to the 50s. And I met some of the people, and we sat for hours just talking about close encounters, and what type of theories that they had on the subject, and also and also the people that I also met back in the early 90s. That I sat down for hours talking to. And some of the people are very well, some of the people on both sides of the spectrum, very well known in today's UFOlogy, either with the history of or the people that are working right now in the subject matter. All right. So that's how. So now you know how I got myself involved. It was because I did have a close encounter of the first kind, and it was because of the Michigan, with the Ann Arbor, Michigan flap, and plus also what was being seen at the same time in Wisconsin. And I'm glad it happened. To tell you the truth, I'm really glad that it happened, and if it could and I can go back in time, I would stop exactly on that date, at that time when I first saw out in that cornfield that ship. As Walter told me about them. Anyhow, it's going to get, like I said, this is going to be more. This book is going to be the most interesting. I do feel that book one was interesting as well, and but I think that book two is going to be just a little bit more interesting. So, I'll catch you later. Bye.